look at the West and look at the backcourts and look at John and Bane, who's been phenomenal. Which other two teams have a better backcourt than West? Welcome to episode 34 of the David Binkowski podcast. Today, my guest, Arturo Gaetti. He is the CTO at SportsGrid. You can find him for now on Twitter at American Numbers and at Data Strictly. Arturo, welcome back to the podcast.
Good to be back. By the way, senior data science, potion move. Yeah, as long as they let us be on Twitter, we can be on Twitter. But as I said, we're gonna go down fighting. It does look like disaster capitalism at its finest.
Yep. It's been interesting. If you're listening to this, most likely you're on Twitter. But if you're not on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen it in the news and what's happening there. Elon Musk took over. A bunch of people left the platform. He's tweeting out stats that aren't backed by anything, that there's more people using it now than ever. And, all this bullshit. But the team that's supposed to get rid of the bots is gone. So it's been a shit show, to say the least. Like I said, for now, we're both on Twitter for now. I'm D. Binkowski, in case you don't follow me. But yeah, it's, I don't see this ending well. When you have Eli Lilly calling the company.
Yeah, that's the one.
Eli Lilly was impersonated on Twitter yesterday, where someone paid $8 for verification, which we all predicted would happen, tweeted out some fake bullshit, and then the company had to issue an apology. They then called Twitter, and I worked with Eli Lilly. Okay, back in the day, I set up their first YouTube channel, and it was a pain in the ass. They were very conservative and very risk averse. But that's one thing you have to understand about companies. They don't want risk. They don't want change. They don't want chaos. And all Musk has done since taking over the app is create chaos. So now Twitter Blue, which is how anybody can get verified, is now suspended because Eli Lilly made a phone call and said, fucking knock it off. It's just like, what is going on, right?
The thing about it is, it's like the best satire. The problem for Lilly is like the best satire is there's a lot of truth to what was said. It's the whole thing with insulin. So the problem is it's a very precarious thing where you lose control, moderation on content, or at least what is it? There's a line basically like perception of truth, right? So if you do it sharp enough and you can get the verification, there's the retraction's not going to get as much traction as the actual kind of lie, right? Or the actual kind of misinterpretation of their data. So effectively, you became the stuff he did turned the space into the Wild West for ad revenue, in the sense of you can't control your narrative, right? Because again, that, and I think there were a couple tweets on Israel and apartheid, right, on IPAC, and again, it's very sharp and very incisive, and advertisers won't have it. There's an open question about whether or not this is on purpose, because he may be trying to crash it on purpose so he can go into bankruptcy court, fire everyone, and then kind of restart from scratch.
Nope.
It's a very, very expensive way to do it. And he also kind of so if you look, the books are public for Twitter, so they had $8 billion to burn, but effectively the way these buyouts work is you're buying. These dudes are coming in like pirates, buying it out and saying, I'm going to use the money this company has to pay off my loan, right?
Yep.
So this is the way Toys R Us died while still being a very viable business, right? It's the interest on these stupid loans that benefit no one. I mean, there's a whole thing about whether or not these buyouts are bad and bad for everyone, but then they don't really add any value to that. But anyway, the other point being that somebody said this, and it's probably the best statement, which is how he was trying to charge $8 for this and for a paywall, and I think he underestimated how good it feels to tell him no, right? Richest man in the world. We can get at the whole thing about Musk. Musk is a guy who he's basically the definition of failing up, in the sense that his family money is blood emeralds, right? So conflict emeralds. mine through apartheid in South Africa. And then he got lucky in the different companies. Like, so he basically like did a thing where like he ended up on the board with PayPal, but really they like Peter Thiel had forced him out by the time they basically sold out, but he still had his shares. So that's how he made like a bunch of money. And then he went into and bought himself into Tesla, which wasn't really his company, but he bought himself, and he basically like he is a good politician or a good enough politician to be in the right place to make money, but he's not a technical innovator. Or, like he's not. This is not a guy who is sharp in the classical technical brilliant. Like he is smart enough politically, a political animal to get where he is, but you know it is built on some very questionable underpinnings, right?
Yeah,
This isn't a guy like
he's someone I look at as a con man. I mean, look at his businesses. With SpaceX as a company is funded by the federal government. It's not like he's out there making profit and doing these things. It's funded through the federal government. He's not really a profitable CEO. So why would someone who's such a disruptor want to take control of a messaging platform where, when the Saudis are your biggest investor and you've got journalists all verified and all that stuff through there, right? So there's a whole like
you want me to walk you through like basic. It's the basic. It's why does Bezos want to own the Washington Post, right? Yep. So effectively, if he is trying to crash it to clear everybody out, so he can actually like get a social media platform that he controls, then if you're the richest man alive, the same like Hearst used to own paper, same thing. Control kind of at least how you're represented in the media, or at least somewhat, and like drive that the whole thing about like it's about like getting people not to make fun of him, but like really it is kind of a little bit about media manipulation and manipulating information. So if you can't actually pull it off successfully, as the richest man alive, there are like the richest grifter alive. There are a lot of grifter opportunities you can do if you can actually control like something that's effectively, a major media corporation, right? I think that's the value for him. Whether or not he can actually pull it off and whether or not he can do it is a whole different thing. Like technically, I don't believe in his competence, but we'll see. I mean, I see why you would want it. Why? Yeah, you want it because you want to control that like narrative, or at least drive it positively and steer it in your direction. Okay. And again, you're the richest man alive, so you do need to have like. I mean, the most logical thing for somebody who's that rich is say, I want to control how media portrays me, so I can protect my interests, basically.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
I look at, I see that Jason Calacanis is like publicly advising him. I don't know if Jason lives in New York with him for those ad agency meetings that completely tanked. I know Jason. I've met him before. I spoke at a conference with him, sat and had lunch with him. And I think he's a smart guy, but he's also like missed on a lot of stuff. He made his money. I don't know if you remember Weblogs Inc. That was his first thing. And he sold it and made a bunch of money, and then has been playing around as an investor ever since. Had some winners, had some losers, and he's kind of in the tech bro circle out in California. So he's not a marketer. And so taking someone like him into New York City, into these ad agencies to meet with CMOs was a miscalculation, because neither he nor Elon really understands advertising or how that ecosystem works. And the number one thing advertisers want is they want consistency and trust, and neither one of those guys provides either. So
did you okay? So, but let me ask a question. So, having met the person who's advising, do you think that person knows that what they're doing is likely to tank the stock and tank the value and possibly drive the company backwards?
If that is the case, then it wouldn't surprise me. So I'll put it.
Because I mean, like again,
every step they've made in terms of, like I said, brand trust, brand safety, and all that, they're just blowing it up. I mean, it's by the way pretty obvious. Just blowing it up.
It's the Ryan Windhorst meme with like the fingers in the air. Why would Elon Musk and this guy do like again? If they're trying, what they're trying to do is clear. It's basically I blank slated. So I'm Elon Musk and I have deep enough pockets where I could basically blank slate this, clear everyone out, and bring clear all the contracts, clear all the obligations, and rebrand. I mean, whether he can pull it off. I mean, once you kill the brand trust and once you kill kind of what made a place work, it's really hard to bring people back. I mean, I don't know. It's a risk.
Well, I hear people saying like, and I'll give you an example. People are saying like, oh, well, that $8 is not a big deal. Just pay the $8. But there is the thing that Twitter did do well, whether those on the far right vehemently disagree, but they're wrong. But what Twitter did do well was create essentially a hierarchy of people who were trusted and experts. I mean, why the fuck do you think I'm verified? Like I'm not, I'm in marketing. I work with Fortune 500s and I've traveled the world and I've spoken at the conferences. I'm an expert. So that remains free. Whether people like what I say or not, I don't give a fuck. But in terms of why was I verified in the first place? I was one of the first people to get verified. Why? Because I knew people at Twitter, because I work with giant companies, and because they're like, this guy knows what he's talking about as it relates to marketing and sometimes other topics. So when you start to strip that out and like, we're going to take it away and we're going to replace it with some jackass who just paid me $8. That's the new standard for how you become verified. You've destroyed the fabric of what made the app, what made experts, what made all those things work. And now it's become this like you said, with the Perry accounts and all that, they had to shut it down. I mean, it's if he's not trying to take it, I don't know what he's doing. That's all.
I mean, it's the death of expertise. I mean, I think some of it is there. Again, it feels like they're specifically trying to do a reset. Honestly, there is no competition because what's the competition? The competition is this, like either TikTok and Instagram are not this. Discord is basically a private silo. Mastodon is what the fuck is Mastodon? I don't know. Like Mastodon,
it's too tech. It's too tech.
No, Mastodon is like basically saying like, oh, we have this nice general BBS server, but like you can go this one, and everyone has their own. It's stupid. Like the point of Twitter is that like, look, it's like Discord does a lot of the same thing that Twitter does, but Discord is a private conversation. Like Twitter is a public conversation. And so, like, what nobody who's a competitor has done is say, look, let's set up as a public like where you can have real time conversations and see people commenting on stuff in real time. And that's really what the value was. And you can choose and curate who you want to see, right? Talking, and that's how you get. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, like, I was offered this a verification at one point. I turned down because what I was doing, I didn't want to necessarily be on a public discourse and be that. So I was doing something else. So, but yeah, I mean, like people who knew what they knew and people who were part of these communities would get certified by the communities as, hey, this person knows what they're talking about. And once you get it into like anybody can get that, well, that doesn't make any sense. Now they're doing verified. They're basically doing, instead of that blue stuff, they're going to do something called verified, which is, so they ended up like, they have to do anyway because that. Again, I don't know if the goal is a tank or the goal is successful build, like kind of pivoting towards kind of like when we get to NBA talk. But it's the same thing. I mean, if you're not trying to purposely fail the company, it certainly looks like you are, right? So it's indistinguishable from magic, It's like science is distinguishable. Same thing. So the other thing that's going on Twitter at the same time, is the election. So what are your thoughts on the election? It does turn out, there are, for context, the Democrats did lose or may lose the House and didn't do as well as 2020. But historically, in the midterms, with the economy like this, like the party in control takes a bath. And really, this is a historical midterm performance for the Democrats. A lot of places like Colorado, they outperformed by 8 points on that. Although Colorado did Colorado implemented massive mail-by voting. So basically they enfranchised, everybody can vote very easily by mail now in Colorado. So effectively, because everybody can vote, like I say basically everybody who works for a living can vote very easily. That means that like a lot of the Republican candidates did way worse. And even safe seats like the Bovaird seat, which is Colorado 3, everybody's been looking at, she might lose, right? She's one of the big MAGA House representatives, and she might end up losing in the district that really nobody expected her to. She expected to win by 8 points. Now, it may come down to like 10 or 20 votes, really, but like she shouldn't have been like, and the reason she was in trouble was again because like Colorado put in some expansions of voting rights, and I think a lot of the Western states put that in, and as you get further west in the U.S., wherever there's been expansion, like again, where people who work for a living kind of vote, then young people are coming in and voting, people who work for a living, and they don't really like the message that GOP is selling. They don't like the whole abortion rhetoric.
Yep.
There was another big election, which is close to your heart, like the Michigan election, where like Whitmer was supposed to be in trouble, and Whitmer ended up taking a trifecta in there. She's going to win the House, Senate, and Michigan governorship because again, she ran straight at it. She tacked left. Instead of attacking right, she tacked left, right straight into it, and she won.
It must be the reality too is that when Donald Trump was relegated off social media platforms, when he could not have access to data, his Cambridge Analytica bullshit, all the PSYOP stuff he did, people are backed away from Trump, and his I think all lost. And that mindset of constantly triggering people, constantly making them angry, painting everyone as the enemy, it got old. And young people in particular, I don't know if you saw the stat Michigan of young people of college students, of the students, so I'm assuming it's college, but the stats for college students that voted for Whitmer was something crazy, like 94%, and up to 6% who went for her opponent, Tudor Dixon. I mean, I've never seen, if any race, any number, even remotely close to 90+% of people said, fuck your shit, take it home. I don't want it anymore. Then the reality is, why would they do that? Well, the economy sucked for them. They can't buy a house. Now cars are super fucking expensive. Like they are literally have their upward mobility has been stolen from them, right? And they're saying, we're done. We're done with this GOP bullshit. We're done with all your Trump bullshit. We're done. So that to me is very encouraging. If that trend continues and all those things, now will Democrats fucking up? Probably, but at least for now. And also, by the way, taking away
the
women's rights is popular. Go figure.
The Democratic leadership is actually like the largest part of the problem. This old, decrepit, like geriatric leadership should have been out on their ass 20 years ago.
Yep.
But like, once you start moving into the Whitmers and the younger generation, you'll do better. I think one thing that's actually like kind of laid out in the here and actually in the Ukraine Russia war is, when you pull a trick, right, you got to expect people to adjust to that trick. So in Ukraine, when Russia took Crimea, they did a lot of disinformation and kind of like manipulation of information and subterfuge warfare. And so they tried that same shit this time, and Ukraine kicked their ass when they did it. Because like Ukraine and NATO spent like 5 years workshopping shit. So when Russia actually went out and started doing that, they found that like Ukraine had like counter challenges and basically were able to like use the information that they were using to capture partisans on theirs. Like they did a whole thing where like they knew where the convoys were for the Russia because of the Russian channels. And so like the initial stage of the war where Russia did have a strategic advantage, it went away because they relied on this old trick that like Ukraine kind of knew they were doing. We're waiting. And it's the same kind of thing here. In some cases, like the counter is already there. I said, look, if the Democrats weren't incompetent, the first thing they should do is they should pass Colorado's like voting reform on mail ballots immediately in Michigan. Immediately. Yep. Don't even think about it. Just pass it. Why? Because then you're basically enshrining like the access for the people who are going to vote for you. Basically, you're enshrining the access for everyone, expanding voting access. And that puts like the fringe of the Republican Party on the outs because like the more people vote, the less likely you're going to get like some of these wingnuts in who win in these like transitional elections where nobody votes. But if people can just vote by mail, right? You can do that. And I think one other really cool thing, I don't know if have you seen this? Have you seen the guy who ran for controller in Los Angeles, right? Who apparently is going to win 60-40. He basically ran in and said, like, he went very specific and kind of put these billboards and said, like, here's the city budget. We're spending big, huge bar on police, this on homelessness, this on services. Does that work for you? Like some very simple visuals explaining visualizing like you're spending 50 million, like, 60% of the city budget is going to this, 20% to this, and 10% to this. Is that what you want? Right? This is not to fund the police. It's saying like, okay, here's where the funding's going, right? Does that make sense to you? Right? And kind of doing these very explanatory like things and visualizing how we're spending things and being, talking about shit that makes sense. And if you explain it to people like that, it's like, hey, we're spending this, like, we're spending 20%, 15% of the budget on potholes and 70% of the budget on traffic. Does that work for you? Right? And people go like, well, fuck, no. I would rather fix the goddamn potholes. I don't give a like, don't give me a parking ticket. Fix my fucking pothole. Don't give me a ticket.
To me, it comes down to very clear messaging about real problems. And that's where the GOP has been like gaslighting the fuck out of everybody and like creating all these bogeymans and all these different things that they want, they want people to distract from it. When in reality, there's a lot of things that aren't working for a lot of people. And if you run on those issues and talk honestly with them about it and be factual, you can actually win. That to me is the one thing that was, I'm going to be interested to see what happens between Trump now and DeSantis. Because I see he's out there shitting on DeSantis.
What is a term that needs to be reclaimed? A term that needs to be reclaimed by the left: tax and spend liberal.
Yeah.
And let me explain why. Because what does tax and spend mean? Tax and spend means I come in, I tax the rich people, right? I tax the big business and the rich people. And I use that money to create infrastructure, which creates like safe middle-class jobs and drives the economy and drives growth. Like when we had these tax and spend liberals and we had this tax go look at the growth codes and go look at the health of the middle class. Well, we're doing that. Why? Because you're taking the money, you're building bridges, you're building roads, you're building services. And the people who are getting paid for that, it's not the millionaire in the fucking house. It's the dude who has a blue collar job, who's a plumber, or who's like, or the guy who's doing like, he's working construction and working transportation. Like these guys are making this money. They're buying services for their house. They're buying services for the community, and the money's like flowing. So having tax and spend liberals, dude, do you like services? Do you like having kind of like a good middle class? Then yes, that's what you need to do, right? Yeah. So tax and spend. You need to tax the rich and spend it.
The issue with that messaging and why it hasn't worked over the last or why it was weaponized essentially is because boomers had money. And so that was just code to the boomers like, hey, you get to keep your money. If you vote for GOP, you get to keep your money and we'll try to make you more money. And while the rest of the country is in decline. Infrastructure falling apart. People can't drink their water and like basic shit's not happening, but you keep your money, boomers. It's okay. We'll make sure you get your money saved.
To make it about like Puerto Rico a bit, and I think you and I have talked about this, is so nothing gets built in the US. No infrastructure projects get built because since nobody they don't want to they reduce tax on the rich and they basically want to basically just support everything by taxing the middle class, and all you really have money to do is kind of keep the crumbling infrastructure together. But then if you think about it from the point of view of the colony in Puerto Rico, we don't get shit because if they're not spending money on building highways and repairing highways in New York, why the fuck would they spend it in Puerto Rico? Right. And the last big projects in Puerto Rico was probably the highway going out west, probably the last big infrastructure the bridge going over the lagoon. And these are 30-year-old projects. Right. So they were when I was in high school, in the 90s, that's when those were built. And if you think about it, that's kind of the same thing with the US. The last big project, I've said this, probably the big dig in Boston, right? Yeah. Is the last big infrastructure project that I got to come up with. And there's been tries for other things, but they don't get done. And if you think about compared to things like China, where China's building rail at a dramatic pace and building they're taking the money and spending it on creating services and improving people's lives. Whereas you go to different places in the US, you see crumbling infrastructure. Same thing here. And that's kind of the key, and the thing that needs to be reclaimed is, look, we want to tax these billionaires and use that money instead of having them keep that money and hoard it because they're not spending on it. They've already got all the money they need. They've got all the capital. They're not going to build new shit. Take that money, instead of them having buy themselves gold-plated private jets, you can take that money and spend it on building highways, building schools, and building hospitals, and building trains. And if you do that, then the person who's building it will take that money and spend it on building his house and building, buying a car and building a deck. And that money goes to contractors. So it gets spread out in the economy. So taxing and spending means if you get a politician who is tax and spend, and he's spending that's a key part. He's spending the money on the goddamn district. That means that money's coming into the community and it's building shit in the community. That's the point that it's not the money's not being spent in the ether. The money's being spent on on the community and making shit better for everybody in the community, generating business, right? cash coming into your community is good, right? That means like if you're a rich person and no like there is no and you're living in a city and there is no like federal spending coming into your district, it's going to be bad for you. You want that federal money coming in. That federal money come in means you make more money. Granted, you gotta pay more taxes, but paying more taxes means you're making more money, right? So it
hand in hand. I get it. I get it. Otherwise, it's race to the bottom. The other equation is the rich people keep their money, and then everything else is race to the bottom. And that's what we have.
well, see, but eventually, like
That's why I have all this stuff. None of this shit's stable. None of it's sustainable or stable. And that's
eventually
again,
you get
why
into
do people say fuck you GOP. There you go. None of it's sustainable.
I mean, it gets to the point where like we're in a situation where like eventually people are going to not be invested in keeping the system in place, and people are not invested in keeping the system in place. They come for the rich people, right?
Yep.
And again, you have to, I think, I mean, again, the pendulum hasn't swung in part because the boomers are still there because of the age curve. Eventually, the age curve is going to fall off, so a lot of the older people are going to die off.
Yep.
And if you look at demographics on the younger people are like they're not as patient, or they're nowhere close to as patient as the others. So again, I think
Well, bring it full circle. Why is that? Why is that?
Because they have nothing.
Well,
right?
they have nothing, and they have the ability to share the fact that they have nothing with one another nonstop through social media.
At least for now.
For right now, they haven't. That's exactly right. So, as someone said, I saw a great tweet, and then we'll go and we'll talk NBA in just a second, I promise. But I saw a great tweet about the fact that people in their 20s, because of social media, are pissed off, and they see all this stuff that they don't have. And the reality is, when you're in your 20s, you're not supposed to have that stuff. You have to work those years to get into your 30s to then fucking enjoy it. That's kind of how it works.
Well,
in the US, right?
Well,
So-
no, but the issue has been that it used to be a handoff between the older generation, the younger generation. The boomers effectively have gained the system, so that handoff hasn't happened. So you look at the share of the younger population, of the money going to the younger population, that's gone down drastically over the last 30 years. So effectively, the money hasn't trickled down like it used to. Money used to move from the older generation to the younger generation.
Wait a
but
minute. You're
as
telling me that trickle down economics is a lie.
Oh, well, trickle down. So, and I touched upon it. So, trickle down works very, very short. So, there's trickle down works if, and for the very, 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 very short term, if the very rich people do not have money to implement capital projects, then lowering the cost of capital, like to borrow money, in fact, you lower the cost of them borrowing money, means they can implement these infrastructure projects, or like these not infrastructure, but like these big projects they wanted to do, which do actually move the economy in the very short term. But once they have all the capital they need, then what they do is they start like making themselves richer, buying like stock options to make themselves richer, and buying politicians, which is exactly what's happened for the last 40 years post Reagan. Like there was a big boom, and then like they started buying out politicians and the political class to enshrine their power, which is how we got effective.
Yep.
Which is why we need the Reagan. We need to go back to the pre-Reagan tax codes.
Yep, exactly. I agree 100%. We're on the same page on that one. And now we may find some agreements and disagreements here. The NBA, we are 11 games in, 12 games in, depending on how many games. 13.
It's starting to get representative of the season. Yeah, the way to kind of view it. It's starting. I mean, it's not quite, but yes.
And I think that picture. You hear this notion of the way GMs look at the season is in 20-game increments, right? 20 games, so we're not quite to that 20-game mark, but there's some staggering shit that you're seeing happening both in the East and in the West, that if some teams may have some cause for alarm, and other teams, you might say, how the hell did that happen? So, Arturo, I thought we'd start in the Eastern Conference, and I'll let you pick first. What's something that's really surprising to you in the East?
I mean, I think something that's really surprising to me in the East is, I pick one thing. Okay, so actually, yeah, the Bulls have actually like held together more than I thought they would. I mean, they're still having some issues because again, they've lost a bunch of guys, right? So. Yeah. If they no Lonzo, they've had Caruso kind of on a limited, like, they've had him, but they've been somewhat limited, although he's like now back But I'm surprised that they've held up this well. It looks like they are like going to compete for at least to play in. And I kind of thought like I was a bit lower than they were at the start of the season on them. And like kudos to them because they've dealt with attrition really, 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 really well. I think the top of the East is not surprising to me. The Wizards a bit, but I don't know if they're gonna hold. I mean, like if you look at the top 5 in that East, Milwaukee's old, right? But they've managed to still typically old teams that are older like this do actually like start to fail. But it does look like they are on a mission at least early in the part of the season and doing really well. Even though they're missing Giannis and a couple other guys, they're still kind of holding together. Whether that stands for like the trick with the Milwaukee is going to be whether they're healthy at the end of the season,
Right.
and how much they can sustain through the season. I kind of tend to think they're going to take their foot off the gas a bit because they want to be healthy going into the playoffs. Although I don't know if they kind of want the 1 seed. That's kind of the trick with them because I do think they care about that.
Right.
Cleveland
is unbelievable.
They're
unbelievable. I did not expect that. Donovan Mitchell playing defense. I mean, who saw this coming? Right away.
But the thing about this is like we've seen this picture before for a similar kind of style guard when Kyrie went to Boston, where is shit in there, but you put him on a team that actually has like really good defenders around him and has a good defensive culture. And really, you're not asking him to be this great defender. You're asking him to just be somewhat competent, and you've got a lot of guys to back him up. So both him and Kevin Love are in really good places on this Cleveland team because they don't need to do shit. They're not key defenders, right? And I've explained this. I don't know if I've talked about this with you here specifically, but there's this misnomer on how defense is played in the NBA. People think about it the same way they think about the offense, and that's completely and utterly wrong. The way you have to think about defense in the NBA, you have to think about there's a primary on-ball defender. It's the guy who's picking up the guy who's coming in with the ball. There's a on-ball help defender who's the guy basically kind of like he's looking out for the outlet pass and helping on the guy at the top of the key driving in. And there's the rim protector, right? So the guy who's between the ball and the hoop, right? So imagine a string between the ball and the hoop, right? So the guy's coming up at the top of the key. Like there's a guy who's got to defend at the tip of the spear, so where the ball is. There's a guy who needs to defend between the tip of the spear and close to the hoop. And then there's the help defender who's typically a wing, somebody like Kawhi, who's floating in the middle between those two guys, who's either helping on the outlets or coming up and putting pressure either at the rim or at the top. And the other two guys that I haven't mentioned are generally going to be the help defenders who are either helping on the rim, like somebody like Kevin Love is perfect for that role. He doesn't have to do much, or he's helping on the wing on the offset on the blind side, right? Coach, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you start thinking about defense that way, effectively, you need to cover those roles, and then everybody else playing around those roles. What you don't want is a guy who's a secondary defender having to be your primary rim protector. So like if Kevin Love's your primary rim protector, you're fucked. If Donovan Mitchell has to step up and be your like primary on-ball defender, you're fucked.
Yep.
But if Donovan Mitchell's basically just hanging out like on the help side and basically picking up interceptions by using his vision and speed, then you're perfectly fine. Yeah. Russell Westbrook's a good example of this. Like where if you put Russ, Lakers are actually using him pretty well on this, where like if you put him on the outside, because he's fast and he's cagey, can be kind of disruptive because he can pick off these like out passes and take off, right?
Yep.
Again, if you're using him in a secondary role, that's the trick. Like the trick with Russell is like if you're using him in the secondary role, he's overqualified. But that's kind of the point. If you look at that Cleveland team, the reason it works is because they have two incredible. They have Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, so they have incredible rim protection at all times. And there's a lot of times where the help guy is just like an elite all-world defender, which is kind of a luxury, which is why people have such a hard time scoring on them. And their on-point defense is pretty good. They have guys who cover that. So effectively, Mitchell isn't being asked to be in a primary role, or Kevin Love is being asked to be in a primary role on defense, which means they can focus on the offense. And there's always like, even on defense, there's always a guy there's always like backup cover, right? So my thought, like the model was a little harsh on them, like the statistical models. I liked it. I thought it was a good fit, and I was good. Like the question is going to be with them is one, if they couldn't hold last season because of injuries. They were really good last season. They couldn't hold because of injuries. The second question is whether or not they're ready. I mean, I think this is a team that could make a conference finals if they get a decent draw. I mean, I think the Celtics and the Bucks are both better than them. And the Hawks are probably on the level in a slightly different way. The Hawks are Hawks are more offensive minded. I like the talent the Hawks picked up really well. I like DeJounte Murray. There's like, and I like the Bell. The trick with the Hawks is like, is everybody going to be around? And actually, like a Hawks Cavs series actually can be kind of fun, like in the playoffs, right? That seems like a fun second round series, right? Like, so it depends on how, like, if the Celtics the Celtics and Bucks are on different sides of the brackets, I expect them to get to the conference final and face each other.
Yep.
But like, I mean, the other team I didn't mention is the Raptors. The Raptors are professionally close. The Raptors remain a professional basketball team. They beat their over under from Vegas 9 of the last 10 years, and it looks like it's going to be 10 of the last 11 years after all is said and done. Because again, they have good coaching, they have good talent. I like Scotty Barnes. I like Pascal Siakam. They're what they are. And you're going to get them in the playoffs, and it's going to be a bitch, right? Like Philly almost ended up losing to them because of the lack of they ended up winning probably. I say Scotty Barnes got.
I gotta say, I'm really thankful. I didn't know this, but Jason Tatum listens to this podcast, because if you go back to episode 31, where I completely shit on him for not having the Mamba mentality, he took that, he compartmentalized it, he processed it, and look what he's doing this year. He looks unbelievable. I will say, Killian Hayes dropping threes and mid ranges in your face is not a good look. But outside of that, he's been unbelievable.
The thing with Jason that he needs to fix, and hopefully he's gotten better at this, and hopefully for the playoffs he'll be better at this, which is, I said, look, he needs to, rather than go to work with Akeem Olajuwon, he needs to go find Kenny Omega and these are wrestlers, Shinya Okada, and work with them on selling. Yep. Because the thing that kills him is he's really bad at selling fouls. Yeah. Right. So he looks very fake when he's selling the fouls, and the refs don't buy it. So he doesn't get that star level call because his work on like Smart is really great. Kyle Lowry, like when I say somebody like Kyle Lowry and Marcus Smart are artists. Like when they sell a foul, they fucking sell a foul. And Tatum has this bad habit of he doesn't, and even when he does get fouled, because his facials and whatnot aren't great, he doesn't really get that. And if he can tweak that, he will get like the Kobe level calls in the playoffs, and that'll take the team. Again, next level to this team is winning the title. I mean, that's right. That's kind of a very young team that really has been there all around. And Tatum is one of those guys that he has a real shot at the MVP this season. I don't know if he can, but he has a real shot at it.
But
if he plays,
it was surprising to me. He's 24. 24. Like,
this team is.
Yeah,
he's 24. Count how many conference finals has he been to at this point?
Right. Exactly.
4. One final, 4 conference finals.
26, 27. He's 24. It's unbelievable.
He went to a game 7 as like a 20. He dueled LeBron James in a game 7 and 20. Right. He was in it. He didn't win, but he was in it. I mean, he is a very, 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 very good player.
I do think also when Tatum goes in for his how to draw fouls, how to sell a foul, can he take Cade Cunningham with him, please? Because that dude, I don't know if you saw the highlight of him driving in and dunking and getting pushed to the ground, landing on his back, no call. 2 guys. It's like, how do you miss that call? Didn't sell it. Didn't flail. Didn't sell it. He sound and looked at the refs like, why didn't you call it? It's like, that's how you sell it.
There's an art to selling contact, right? This is and I say wrestlers because the real hard, high level workers who make you believe something. And that's kind of what you want. You want to sell it, express it, and do it in a way that there are people who know how to do this. And it's something that you have to tweak. And it's always, I always got mad about it with Brad, where he was too good to two shoes to that. Smart was the only one who was doing all that team. And I think they've gotten better at it, but I think Tatum is that's one thing he should work on. As for the rest of the East, I mean, the Knicks are tryhards. Indiana, I thought was going to fuck around and win 35 games or more. And again, I stand by that. The thing about that Indiana team is Tyrese Halliburton is great. The Kings are stupid to get rid of him, and he remains great. The Nets, Kyrie's the bad junior guy. People are like, oh, why do you get dude, you can't be anti-Semitic in fucking anywhere but in Brooklyn. What are you doing? From an on-the-court perspective, on the on-the-court perspective, there was I saw
there were 10 plays so far in the season that Steve Nash called where Kyrie decided just to freelance. And of course, the rest of the team stands around and watches him, just completely disrespecting his coach, disobeying his coach. You can't keep your shit together off the court. You can't listen on the court. What value do you bring at this point other than being a good scorer? Like, just he's a cancer. He's an absolute cancer.
Look at his ex-team. The Cavs looking like the 1 seed. The Celtics, he left, went to the finals. The Nets, he's gone, and they go on a win streak. Again, he's that Uncle Drew movie was probably biographical in the sense like he's a talented guy, makes everybody hate him. Or like, I mean, here's the thing: his guys who played with him are kind of backing him up. But I mean, I think some of that somebody's down with like Jaylen Brown saying, "Dude, just no, no." I get you think he's your friend, but no, this is really stupid. Like you should not back him. Like the stuff that Kyrie put out there in the world knowingly because he said he watched. He's like, you're like, oh, he didn't watch it. I watched it. Of course I watched it. I was like, dude, that is some hateful, like, it's some bad shit. Like, seriously, like, bad shit. So you should not make any excuses for him. And much like, I forget the name of the Miami Heat guy who did the Arian, who basically disappeared from the league. Like, the fact that he's talented, he's not worth it. And this, as a Celtics fan, he really isn't worth it, right? You're better off without it. It's not worth it. It is a sunk cost. I would not want any part of this bonehead because one, he's problematic in the locker room, and he's problematic from a business point of view too. Like, and he's problematic from a personal point of view because if you're willing to put this shit out in the world, and he's put up anti-vax stuff, he's put up flat earth stuff, and now he's put up like like Holocaust denial. Like, why? Like, just why do backwards.
I? Like, it's just walking it as far back as possible. I don't be in the league anymore.
I don't care how talented you are. It's not worth you. Nobody's worth it. And the proof is like when he leaves, they get better. So there's no justification for having him on the team, right?
Yep.
Business, ethical, or moral, right? And I you got to be responsible for your actions, and this is really kind of repugnant. The Sixers, hey, rock divers, man, and really take the hard thing away. And I like all the Sixers fans who were like in their feelings about like Joel Embiid, like, oh, he didn't win MVP. Wait, so they're 5-7 right now. So Joel Embiid played how many games?
Yeah,
like I'm looking now. Like Joel Embiid has played how many games this season? That they're like, is he not playing? Is he hurt or something? No, he's played 8 games. He's playing. He's not hurt right now. So he's played 8 games. He's there. And they're not doing very well. So I don't know. It's like...
I know he was like pissed when the season started because they were letting Harden basically cook, right? He was taking, I forget the number on dribbles, but he was taking 200 dribbles a game, some stupid number, and basically ball hogging. And so that turns, if you're a big man, you run the floor, you block the shots, you put in that, you do the dirty work. You want the fucking ball in offense too, right? So
you know how everybody like really admired Jokic and gave him 2 straight MVPs. Part of the reason they gave him 2 straight MVPs is when the team went to shit, and like basically his entire team was a walking mash unit. Jokic basically threw his fucking team on his back and carried them to a top 4 seed. Yep. And he was the best player on the floor every fucking night, and he made that team a thing. Even with like everybody on the men that not there, he did that. And if Embiid wants to be offended by Jokic winning and wants to be like alone his feelings, then dude, here it is. Yep. You've got the golden opportunity. Like, this is the opportunity for you to show me. Don't tell me. Yep. And he isn't doing it. And like, again, I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm saying like he's brought this evaluation on himself back in a certain way. And I'm saying, okay, here it is, man. You asked for it. Like, Joel, show me. And right now, he isn't showing me. Like, if you put Jokic on this team is doing much better, right? Yep. Because Jokic is just that. Like, Jokic has that. What's the line? That dog in it, right? Like that X-ray with a dog in it. Big gigantic dog. He likes quarter horses. So he's got that quarter horse in it.
They also play very different styles of basketball. Where when Embiid catches the ball, it's a one-on-one move. There's no question about it. You know what he's going to do. He's either shooting or he's looking to drive, right, or post up. He's not
And
getting his teammates involved the way Jokic. Jokic takes what's given to him, and he's masterful at it.
Jokic is very much in the Dirk and the Dirk kind of mold in that like he is an offense in and of himself.
Yep.
Now, if there is no other player on him and he's playing an elite defense, like same thing happened with Dirk, you can shut him down if there is no outlet pass, which is kind of what happened with him on playoff. And he still will get his. It's just like much, but effectively, Jokic and nothing else is more valuable than Joel and nothing else, right?
Yep.
Because he is Jokic is a good enough presence on defense, but he is otherworldly on offense. And ultimately, you basically get a team that's going to end up being like, if he's there, you're going to get a team that's going to be top 8 in offense and maybe like top 15 in defense. That's good enough.
Yep.
Like this is assuming you have nothing else, and you get anything else, you can start getting into top 5s and getting into the contender spot. And ultimately, that is enough. Right.
And the question is,
Miami,
what do you think? We're talking about, well, before we jump off of Philly, just to get your take on this, what's the record got to be 20 games in before they start looking at Doc? Or is it 40 games? Because at some point they got to make, 2 games under 500, 12 games in. They don't look great. Their point differential's 0.8. So and they're not even playing.
But what is the move for, like, one thing to keep in mind, like Morey doesn't make disadvantage trades, right? If you look at his record, he doesn't make trades that are to his disadvantage. So what is the move that he can make that is to his advantage? I think the trick with Philly is they're in a bad position in a way where like they're not really holding assets that they want to move. They don't want to move. I mean, the only asset they would possibly want to move or could move is Embiid. Right?
Yep.
That's the only one that Morey, I think, would probably move, and I don't know he wants to do that. He's not moving Maxey, right?
No.
Maxey's a cheap piece who is much better than his value, and that's the one you keep around. Harden, at this point, I mean, if somebody offered you something for Harden, maybe you do it, or maybe you just hold pat until Harden gets back and see what you have. And assume that if you can get into the play-in, you can make some noise. But again, you have Doc. I mean, again, sticking with Doc Rivers, like the path for this team is they're going to probably get into the 8th seed, and they're going to get trounced by Milwaukee, Cleveland, or Boston in this series. Because either like those 3 teams will take a Doc Rivers team and expose them for the fraud they would basically, we'll just take them. Like the Celtics love playing the 6 in the playoffs. The Bucks love it now, and I think Cleveland is just too rough for them. Right. And Embiid, but like it's just defensively, they're just too rough. And Donovan Mitchell would have a party in that. Yeah. So yeah, no, I know the upside on this team is a first round loss at this point.
Yeah.
And there isn't much to do like, but I think like the take is, unless you get to be, I mean, like what the Philly may basically maybe do is be a facilitator for a trade.
Yeah. Or
if somebody wants to take Harden, like give it to them. But I think that the move for Philly is hold and then fire Kodak in the offseason. Yeah, there's no reason to fire Doc. You've got a scapegoat Harden being hurt. You can fire Doc next season. Like you don't need to move him now. The Heat look old, but I mean it's close. So I think they'll figure it out. Maybe here's the thing. Maybe this was a risk with this Heat team as the age is up there. Maybe this is the season where like they reset. I kind of think that Spo will figure something out, have them like in the 6th seed, right? I don't think the Wiz are going to finish ahead of them yet, right? Unless something goes really wrong. But we'll see. I mean, Detroit has talent, but I mean, has young talent, but I mean, it is what it is. You're not going to compete this season. That wasn't planned.
Right.
Orlando may have lucked into a guy. We were talking about him before. Like Banchero is a guy. Yep. He's a dude. I'm really interested in this Magic team. You know what? I might want to move. I forget his name. The MAGA forward. What's his name? On Orlando. The guy who's hurt. The guy who got hurt about.
He was anti-COVID vaccination.
Yes, he did the COVID thing.
Jonathan Isaac.
Yeah, I may want to move Isaac off this team, but here's why: because I'm a big believer in vibes, and like we talked about it with Kyrie, and I don't know that I want his vibes on my team. And no, if you've got a decent team, keep the crate. Like, oh, he's talented, but he's talented. He's injury prone, and he's a head case. So just get him off. Like there is a thing about you want to have a good organizational vibe. You want to have guys who are leaders. You want to have guys who work hard. Like, look at the Celtics. I wasn't worried about the Celtics, the coaching strife, because if you look at their organization, there's a bunch of guys who are like, they're league VPs. They're well respected by the players. They all play hard. Everyone likes them. So yeah, it's a good vibe. And the more guys like that you can have, and I don't know Isaac who's going out to these MAGA rallies and like saying stupid shit. It's like it's a liability as a team. And if you're a good, young, likable team, the last thing you want is a guy who's going to kind of alienate any of your fans. So yeah, just
so speaking of which,
shove
I want you let's play a little game. It's called Guess the Magic Player. Are you ready? I'm going to just list off some stats, and you tell me who this is. 22 minutes a game, 67.5% field goal percentage, 43 point. Yeah, you got him. Finish it. By the way, former Pistons legend who never actually played for the Pistons because he failed the physical. Bull is. I mean, I saw the Magic home opener in Detroit, and blocking shots, getting boards, dumps.
Yeah,
he was actually good.
The trick with Ball is, and I've said this, you have to use him like Kevin Durant. Like that's the trick with him, and that like teams need to figure this out. And actually, I'll let me go on a Victor rant real quick. So one thing I figured out, or I think I did, is teams are pushing the wrong body type on these guys. They keep thinking, oh, we have to bulk. No, you don't. No. These guys who are super tall. Think about the guys who are super tall who've had the long successful careers. Dirk, Kareem, Duncan. They're all guys who got lighter as they got older, and a lot of them did flexibility drills and were lighter. And so you want them to look more like swimmers, not bodybuilders, right? So if you look at Victor Wembanyama, I think Victor has almost got the perfect. You don't need him to bulk up. You need him to be flexible and have lean muscle and be like, same thing with Durant, who's a guy who can like kind of move around and do things. I don't need, like, he's tall enough where I just need him to be skilled and flexible and athletic because that will stretch his career. I don't want him to carry bulk. Same thing with Bobo. Like, let him be kind of what he is. And really, you want to use him more as a small forward because he can shoot and can move around. If you look at Wembanyama, the thing that makes him so good is that you look at him and he's working on the outside. It's that Dirk kind of skill set where like he's going to make the defense collapse on, right? And everybody else is going to do better because the defense has to collapse on him. And his shot point is so high up that like you can't fucking block it. He basically is shooting free and that creates a problem. And I think that like if we can kind of like scratch that, guys like Bobo, I mean, can work, but I mean like you got to get him on a team that lets him beat him. Doesn't try to turn him doesn't try to turn him into a bodybuilder and put weight on him because that'll slow him down and make him less healthy over time. You're going to ask me about the lines or about the stats.
Oh, so I didn't finish his stat line, but yeah, he's shooting. So these are all career highs, by the way, which is, he's getting a chance to play. So you put it in the right system, and let's be honest, on a losing team, 3-9 team. So you're gonna get some freedoms on that team that maybe you wouldn't get with higher expectation on a team that is winning. But he's shooting 84% from the line. He's averaging 6.8 rebounds over 2.2 in his career. Right, his assists are up by 0.1, 2.1 blocks, and 11 points a game. I mean, he's not my most improved. Let's not get carried away, but having a nice early part of the season, and for somebody who he almost landed on our team after Denver tried to trade to us, and it didn't. It's nice to see him having success. Kind of wish he was on our team right now. Quite frankly, if we're going to be bad, let's at least be bad at entertaining and shoot well, because right now the Pistons are not shooting well at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm one of the things that's really interesting about this Magic roster is the fact that like they've been picking up these guys who are kind of projects in a way, or like the other teams have been giving up that have potential. Bobo, I think Markelle Fultz is still on this team about to make a start. He was actually like doing well before he got hurt. I think if you can do things with these guys, you can either reclaim them into like draft assets. You're not going to keep them around. But I think it's a good tack. If you look at this, it's an interesting team. Like if you can get some of these pieces, like if Fultz is anything, right? And he doesn't have to be great. If he's a starter level player or like a secondary guard level player, then that's great. And you add Bobo, he's a secondary piece, and So this is a team that could be close to a 500 team next.
Yep.
So it's a really interesting way to kind of build your roster. They're like, I have time, I can take on these projects and reclaim them, right? But they're not drafting them. They're like finding these guys that other teams lost patience with and bringing them in and giving them some time to do, then adding their picks. I stand by, like, I don't necessarily want Isaacs around if he's going to be like a bonehead.
Right.
If he's going to be an injured bonehead, I don't want his toxic energy in my locker.
Yep.
Right.
Well, it's funny.
And I don't know. I mean,
the Magic and Pistons are always talked about in similar conversations because they're on a similar path, a similar timeline. So,
but I, you know what? Honestly,
and they do the reclamation thing in Detroit too, right? With Kevin Knox there now,
But if you look at the pieces on that Magic roster right now, depth-wise, I think it's a little bit more interesting to me than what Pistons have done. I mean, like, look at the guys with it, like Franz Wagner, Suggs, Bol, like Balanchero, Fultz. There's like, if those teams, there's Ross. I mean, if that team is kind of healthy, then you could see that team. Like, whereas I think that Pistons are still a little bit more. The Pistons are a little bit more away than that. I mean, watching both teams, do you disagree with that?
So what I see with Detroit is, so this was just StatMuse put this out there yesterday, I believe. The highest scoring starting five in the league is the Pistons starting five of Cade and Sadiq and Boyan, Isaiah Stewart, right? They are rolling out, and of course, Jaden Ivey. Those guys can score and get buckets. And the challenge has been, we have no bench depth. And the guys, then someone like Killian Hayes finally had a good game against the Celtics of all teams. But why did that happen? Because they put him with a roller, Durant, so he could get someone dunking the ball. Because they left Bogdan, like they left shooters and playmakers in with him, so he wasn't forced to do it all by himself. I think once they have the pieces around these guys, then we'll really know what we have. Once we have a better bench, I think we'll be more competitive.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, that it's underrated, very, very underrated. That just doesn't happen. And what I mean by that is, it isn't accidental when these teams are very good at building ancillary pieces and keeping teams around. There are some front offices that are very, very, very good at finding guys to, like, non-draft guys, finding roster guys or developing roster guys. The Spurs historically were that. The Warriors are really good at this. Celtics are really good at this. Miami's really good at this. Magic do seem to be good at this now. I'm trying to think. There's a couple others where they're the Lakers. The Lakers have been very good at finding NBA players from random places, and that's how they've stayed afloat. Even though they've made these horrible top level decisions, there's David Caruso, the Alex Caruso, where you find this guy who can be a serviceable or great defender and be a guy who's on trash heap and develop him. That's actually a really, really, really important skill to being competitive long term in the NBA. Look at these top teams. Or reclamation projects. The Bucks have done that. Bobby Portis. They you find these guys other teams have given up on, and you make them something on your team, and that's actually really, really valuable in terms of staying competitive long term. But it isn't accidental.
No.
You're just not just going to find these guys. Milwaukee had they have a good tendency of finding these guys and bringing them in and making them something on the team.
Yep.
And that's kind of again, it's important skill. It's consistently the same organizations who are doing that. And I think, again, what I'm seeing right now is it looks to me like Orlando is further ahead in that game than Detroit is. We're comparing two rosters. I think you said it. Detroit at the top level is great, but they don't, the pieces, right? Organizationally, they haven't gotten good at identifying or developing the incidental piece.
Right? They're not going to a little bit that they wasted a draft pick on or what not. I don't know if they drafted him or just brought him as an unrestricted or undrafted free agent, but they brought in Boeheim's kid to the Pistons, and he's been fucking terrible. He was awful in summer league. He didn't play much in preseason, and he's in the G League on their G League affiliate.
Yeah, that's
a waste of roster spot.
If you're willing to spend a development roster spot on a nice on Boeheim's kid, that tells me you're not taking it serious.
Yeah.
Because if you, again, think about guys like Jonathan Poole, and think about Juan Toscano Anderson, think about guys like Kevin Looney, right? Or think like these are like guys who are important parts of title teams. Like
Yeah.
think about, I mentioned Caruso. I mentioned like these are, these teams are finding these guys and putting them into like half the Miami roster. Oh, Toronto. I should have gotta mention Toronto. Toronto's like another one that's like really, really good.
They're
the
good,
great
yeah.
organizations in the NBA have a do not waste development roster spot. They basically work these roster spots to find these guys. They keep trying. They trot these guys out. They find these pieces like that 7th or 8th or 9th guy. That second. Remember that the whole joke about the Spurs second unit that would go out like they probably make the playoffs in the East like because they took time and took care, and like the organization, like the development team was the team, right? They weren't gifting out slots. That was a team that was there to train people in the Spurs system or the Warriors system or the Lakers system, and like tie stuff out and do that. And that's kind of what I'm saying. Like I'm saying that like right now, the Magic to me looks like an organization that at least has tweaked to that, right? Now, again, we got to see over a couple of years, but it is interesting that they have kind of the, once you start seeing some depth and interest, then yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a piece. And I think we'll talk about it when we get to the West. There's like, I think there's a theme that like, that part of the reason they're doing well is because I think organizationally, they did a really good job at like filling out the spot because again, hey, the guy who's doing that has done that before. I think actually like
Hornets in the last one in the East. But I mean, they're kind of
they just hurt.
Yeah, they're not a team that's going to do much. They're not going to play it. They are.
How many games does Carmelo play? Like LaMelo play this year? Like at all? It's just. I mean, again, I kind of like the talent on this team, but it does look like has he played at all this season?
Well, Dennis Smith Jr. is now out too. Now he's out.
Yeah, so I see he played in the preseason. He hasn't played so LaMelo hasn't played like the best player hasn't played all season.
Right.
I know Rozier was hurt, like Hayward. It's there's always one team that gets hit with the injury bug. It does seem like it's Charlotte.
Yeah.
I think there's talent there. It's just like if the talent can't stay healthy there. Here's the thing: Charlotte might be all in for Victor.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then they're not gonna like if I said if LaMelo has a hangnail, he's gonna go go play with your apes, kid. Okay.
Let's talk to the
so
West.
The West. So are we gonna talk about the number 1 seed in the West?
You mean the Utah Jazz, the
Utah Jazz, like. So I was just mentioning. So Danny Ainge, as a Celtics fan, I know who he is. I know how he works. He doesn't care about tanking. Like Danny's really good at building a deep organization. Right? He is very good at finding guys. He's very good at doing reclamation projects and building a tending and actually like hiring decent coaches too. That's the other thing. So I think one, he hired a really good assistant, and this team has a really good. If you look at the roster on this team, David and I were talking about this morning. I said, look, this is a team that has a bunch of guys. Maybe I had like 6-8 guys who could be on the bench and get significant playing time in the finals, or probably like in the conference.
Yep.
Because it's a bunch of dudes who've been there before, and like a lot of veteran guys who like know what they're doing, guys who are like on their contract. And Danny already got his picks from this draft, and he's at this point, he wants this team to play well. And anybody if somebody makes him an offer for a player, he'll take it. But if this team is better than they make a run, then that's money in the bank for Danny. Danny won't care. It's great for him because again, he's already banked his picks. He's already got the picks from the Donovan Mitchell and the Rudy Gobert. He's got the coach that he likes. He's got a bunch of gamer dudes on a fun team that's going to sell tickets. Actually, if you watch these Jazz games, this Jazz team is fun. Like this, if you watch them, like I remember like watching early in the season and immediately going, "Oh fuck, these guys are just going to like blow out the over," because like you watch it and it's a bunch of gamers. It's a bunch of guys who try hard, play hard, and who know how to win basketball. Right, and it's underrated. And maybe like their best player is Conley. Conley is within the last 5 years, Conley was a top 5 MVP guy. So I mean, And Larry Markkanen can be useful when he's used properly. He was useful last year. Jared Vanderbilt's a guy that Minnesota hated to give up, and he's good.
Yep.
And then Kelly Olynyk is a guy who's been on good team. Clarkson's a guy who's been on good team, right?
And the coach, taking Hardy from the Celtics was a steal for first and foremost. And I thought I saw
everybody on that staff got promoted. And like Danny brought his guy, and then the other guy, who's the guy, Brad's guy, is the other guy who got promoted. And the guy who came in from the outside, like, slept with somebody's wife, and he got fired.
Yeah.
But I mean,
to me, the thing that's impressive, they had a game the other day. I believe they had 30 assists in a game. They're averaging 27.7 assists per game. So it's just share the ball. And
it is a very well coached and a very a very smart basketball.
Yeah.
Right. Like again, let's look at it. It's like Conley, Clarkson, Markkanen, Vanderbilt, Kelly Olynyk, right?
Yeah.
The second unit is Sexton, Tucker, Rudy Gay, Nick Alexander Walker, Malik Beasley, and Walter Kessler. Right.
Yep.
If I told you before the season, this is a team that like Eric Spoelstra has for Miami. Right?
Yep.
Is this team making the playoffs in the East?
Probably. Under Spo?
Probably.
Yeah.
Can they win Can they win their division?
Maybe.
Yeah. You would probably say, hey, let me put some money on Spo. Let me put some money on Spo winning the division, and he'll be in it the last 2 weeks of the season for you to hedge out, right?
Yeah.
He'll be within shouting this. And the same thing. I think the coach is good. I think the talent is good. Do I think they're going to hold for the entire? Man, this is interesting. So looking at the standings. So one of the things you have to look at is you look at the standings. The other thing you want to look at is you want to look at the point differential.
Yep.
And so the point differential for this team is 6.1. So the Suns are like right now have the best point differential in the West, and they're tied for the best point differential in the league with the Cavs. The Jazz look like a team that's gonna win roughly like right now they're playing like a team that's gonna win 55, right?
Yep.
I mean, obviously it's early, low sample. Obviously, can Conley stay healthy for the entire season? Will Danny, if Conley doesn't get healthy, make some trade? Honestly, I think this Jazz team is probably going to make the playoffs. And I think partly because I think the West is definitely weaker than it's been in a very long time. So I think like even if they get to like 44 wins, they probably get an 8 seed or 7 seed. They get into at least the play-in. Whether they're going to stay at the top tier, like I think we need like 10 or 15 more games to kind of decide that or see that. They're definitely going to be competitive and fun the entire season. But I don't know that they can hold the entire season. Like it's.
I'm looking at the roster, and it's very much. We got Markkanen's leading them in scoring with 22.7. I'm wondering, as a Pistons fan, having seen the 04 team, having seen a bunch of guys who are essentially reclamation projects and cast-offs and misfit toys come into a season with a chip on their shoulder. I mean, there's a lot of parallels to that era. The defense isn't the same, obviously. Different style of basketball, different era of basketball. But a bunch of good players can play together real well and get well coached. And they can do some things. I'm not going to doubt them anymore. The only thing I doubt is the jerseys are still the ugliest in the league, but that's a side point.
Yeah, but I mean, I think again, the key with this team is health. I mean, obviously, there's some key pieces that are vulnerable on this team. As I said specifically, I mean, without Conley, it does get kind of dicey. And so, like, you kind of need him. So Conley and Markkanen and Clarkson have been playing really well, and so is Olynyk. But I mean, like, once you get into if you have to get into the deeper bench, then it actually does get very blunt. Like if you Bender was like, but if you have to go with Sexton and Taylor Horton Tucker, and although I mean there's still reclamation projects that might improve as the season goes up, but you kind of do need that top trio, like Markkanen, Clarkson, Conley, and Olynyk. Sort of fourth in there. That's your key. And Vanderbilt, you do need that. That top 5 is a very good. That's a plus rating across the board. Top 5, and if that top 5 stays healthy, this is like that Hawks team. That I don't know. I mean, I don't think they can actually win the playoffs. Go deep in the playoffs. They probably win a first round if they get the right opponent. But I don't like they do kind of need Conley, and like if they lose any one of those guys, then really the collapse is fast.
Right.
But I mean it's fun, and I'm gonna enjoy watching them because they are a fun, good team.
Yeah.
Next is Portland.
Yeah, Portland's
Again,
got Dan back again, right? I mean, that was the difference.
I think Portland is out kicking their coverage at the moment. I do think Portland is closer to probably more like a 45 win team. Same thing where I put like on the Jazz, but like they are. I do feel like they are kicking the coverage a bit more because it's a very we've seen this movie before with Portland, right? They have some parts that like aren't necessarily the most robust.
Right.
And they rely on Nurkic, and Nurkic does tend to miss time. I like Gary Payton is a guy that I like.
Yeah.
He's not again.
Warriors fought that one. I'm sorry, but they did.
He did. He's really great. I mean, like if they're fully kind of healthy and they're good. I mean, I do think there are some vulnerable pieces of that. I think they're. I mean, obviously, I think they're a playoff team. I think right now they are kicking the coverage a little bit. I think their upside is going to be more like. I think Utah has. I mean, actually, I think they're about the same team. Both, I think, are going to fade back to the pack a little bit as some of these other teams pick up. I do think Phoenix and Denver are the real deal. I think Phoenix is who they are. It's going to depend really as to this is the season where they have to start transitioning off like Chris Paul more, and that kind of bit him in the ass in the playoffs last year.
He's not. Yeah, he's this year.
Well.
He's not a good season so far. Let's just put it that way.
You read the article on how the Mavs beat them in the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
The 538 article where like basically they just ran traps at him.
Yep.
And they basically like physically wore him down, and it worked because it took him completely out of the game.
Yep. And
they didn't have that second person to kind of step up. And I think that's kind of where we need to be. Is like Booker needs to be the guy for this team.
Yep.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I love their upside. I wouldn't pick Phoenix in a final series or like conference final series at the moment, right?
Right.
But the problem is like the other contenders are a little bit of a mess. Like the next contender is probably like Denver, and Denver still has to figure out how to integrate all the parts they got back,
right,
effectively. I think ultimately of these 4 teams that we've discussed, Denver has the most upside and the most talent once they can figure it out.
Yep. And
the other one's like Memphis, who's having some growing. Like Memphis was here last season. I expect them to be here. I kind of think that the guys, the teams discussed, I kind of feel like Memphis might be the one that might be the 1 seeding. I think they have it. I think trick with them again. They kind of have to, this is the year where it's a little bit of a growing pace.
Look at the West. Look at the West and look at the backcourts. And look at John and Bane has been phenomenal. Which other 2 teams have a better backcourt than West? Realistically,
no one.
Right. I mean, that's Luka, who does Luka have? I mean, to compete with that, nothing.
Yeah, I think
New Orleans is interesting because they're big and they play. They're a fun team to watch, but.
New Orleans isn't that figuring it out stage.
Yeah,
New Orleans really is very, very talented, and they've got Zion. So I think the West is more interesting because we don't know who's going to step out. The Clippers are hanging around even though they have a negative differential, but really they're kind of like the Berlin season where they're pulling just enough out with Kawhi. And they're going to keep doing that. They're going to try just as hard as they need to win the games they think they can win, but they're not going to kill themselves. The Mavs don't have a running partner for Luka. The Pelicans are a little bit. They're very, very talented, but we don't know that they're going to put it all together. They're very, very talented. I think the Pelicans, like could the Pelicans finish as the 1 seed in the West? Yes. They have to put it all together. Could the Mavs? I see that's a harder ask. Could the Grizzlies? Yes. Could the Nuggets? Yes. Could the Jazz? Wow, I don't know about that. Could the Trailblazers? I don't think so. Phoenix? Yes. Denver? Yes. Right. See, kind of the Clippers. Yes, but what they want to, right? So the Clippers, I think, are happy with the top 4 seed, getting a home seed, and letting Ty Lue figure it out. That's like Ty Lue with a top 4 seed and a healthy. Ty Lue with a top 4 seed and an actual healthy roster can make the finals. He's almost made the finals with like less than a top 4 seed and a non-healthy roster. Yeah, he almost kind of like people forget that Tyronn Lue almost during the finals run with like the things he had in his pocket, right? So it's he can they can afford to hang around as long as they want to just make sure their guys are healthy and ready to go to playoffs.
Now
I don't know, San Antonio
5-7 teams that you could not tell a different. You could not have a more different story to tell about each one, right? I mean, no one's expected San Antonio to hit.
San Antonio's just because of pop, but I don't think they don't want to compete. I think they're gonna like fall off.
Yeah,
Minnesota's the one that's disappointing because like they have the talent. It's just it just doesn't seem to be working. I need to like sit down and watch Minnesota.
What's missing with Minnesota, and the media is not a predictor necessarily of how your team's going to do, but when you start to look in the media and look at players calling each other fat, blaming one another for losses, there is no leadership on that team. There is none. And the thing that they missed the most, the reason that they did as well as they did last year, is that as a guy who's now playing for the Lakers, they lost Pat and Bev, they lost their leadership. They have who's the veteran leader on that team?
They lost underrated. They lost Jared Vanderbilt.
Yep.
And how's Utah doing with Jared Vanderbilt? Yeah, he's dude that. Like it's that X-ray with the dog in it, right? You know what I mean, right? The X-ray with the dog. The guys who like are just fighters and they care, they play hard, and this is why we like. This is like Utah has like 6 of those guys, right?
Yep.
Like and that actually kind of like makes like Conley, like you have like Conley and Olynyk and Jared Vanderbilt, and like you have these guys. The same thing is like Minnesota doesn't have their solve. Like it's the whole Jimmy Butler beating these guys in practice.
Yeah.
And we gotta want Anthony Edwards to be that guy. We don't know if he's ready for that role yet. And I mean, Rudy just seems to be like an ancillary piece, and he needs to be used properly. But I don't know.
We detailed that one before. His work on the French team versus how he was used in Utah could not have been more.
Let's get to the interesting stuff. Golden State. So is Golden State
over the Kings? Wait, we're going to skip over the Kings?
Come on, who cares about the Kings? I don't care about the Kings. The Kings, I will not take the Kings traded Tyrese Halliburton away on a rookie contract. I'm not going to spend a second on the Kings. They're like, what the fuck, man? Like, dude, you get a guy you got a guy on a cost control contract who can be a top 5. Like Tyrese Halliburton is a guy who can be a top 5 guy. Yep. It's like you just lucked into him and decided to keep. And I like, oh god, I forgot his name. If I'm gonna diss him, or what his name. So as much as I like the Aaron Fox, they should have traded Aaron Fox.
Yeah,
fuck it. Like move the air. Like what is Harrison Barnes still doing on the Kings? Like he's a guy who like useful. Like these are just like, dude, you trade the Aaron Fox, you trade Harrison Barnes, you keep Tyrese Halliburton, and you build around him. Like you don't. What the fuck? Like, of course, Indiana traded the Miles Savanas for. Like, I like Savanas, but like, if you get Halliburton, you get fucking Halliburton.
Yeah.
Like it's you're a bad franchise. Stop it. Like, get better advice. Golden State. So 2 seasons ago, where Steph really, in my mind, should have been the MVP. The reason he should have been the MVP was the Warriors built the fucking worst possible team to put around it. And part of that was I literally had to build a model that said, like, how do the Warriors look when James Wiseman plays versus when he doesn't? Because when James Wiseman got hurt, the Warriors were like 15 points better for 48. That is holding and kind of getting worse now.
Yep.
James Wiseman is why, like, again, pick the part that they drafted him over LaMelo because he looked good in a suit. But James Wiseman is the reason why you have a G League team. He should not be anywhere close to your main. Like he shouldn't be playing NBA basketball. He should be playing G League basketball at best. He is just terrible. And like when he's not on the court, the Warriors are a good team. When he is, they're bad. It's ridiculous. And until like they can like be shown not to play him, then they're gonna like. Now, do I think the Warriors are gonna miss the playoffs? I mean, eventually they'll lose Wiseman's number, I think, and like get into like AC and give the Suns fits, but this does kind of put them in a situation like 2 years ago where like any injuries takes them out, because like that team, I contend that Warriors team like 2 years ago could have won the title, but they got hurt. They were Steph broke his ass, literally broke his ass. They were on fumes, and they basically managed to move the playing game they probably shouldn't have lost. But if they'd actually managed to get in, I think they'd probably make a run to the finals. But again, same thing here. You're putting yourself in a position where, you're gonna have to go to like Portland and win a goddamn playoff game against that crazy crowd.
Yeah.
Or you're gonna have to go to Denver and altitude, beat Jokic, who is actually really fucking good in these playoffs. And you're putting yourself into a disadvantaged position, which again, as a Celtics fan, more power to them if they want to do that. I don't want to.
For me, it's the Golden State Warriors shaking hands with the Detroit Pistons. The thing in common is they have no fucking bench. I mean, let's be realistic. Poole's been terrible. He has the lowest or fourth lowest PER of the league, and he just signed that massive deal. They've got no bench. I mean, who are they? I mean,
they lost
hurt, right? But
they lost a bunch of real. They had a really good, really deep bench, and they lost Gary Payton Jr., Otto Porter Jr. They lost a lot of juniors. They lost a lot of important parts, and they gained the worst regular player in the league back, which is James Wiseman.
Yep.
So some of that is missed by just not playing Wiseman, but they missed a lot of the guys that they had. And
I'll also put it out there again. I forget which episode it was. We were talking about this before. They have not drafted well. They've not drafted well. They had to backfill your roster with draft picks that you actually develop.
They've done a good job at getting guys off the trash heap, but then these guys have left, right?
Right.
Like I mentioned, Juan Toscano Anderson, and he's with LA now. These guys, LA does a good job. Let's grab these guys and pick them and now they don't have the set that they have. They're gonna system play wide, and they're gonna put themselves into a really bad position. And so I think that definitely under on that. Again, if they might just be 2 seasons ago, where it's a really good team that just doesn't puts themselves in such a bad position that they run into Ty Lue in the first round or something, and Kawhi happily sends them home because Kawhi loves. Basically, I joke that Kawhi owns that stadium. If he's out, he's gonna destroy that. That team has a real problem matching up to. They don't have any talent to do that. They're gonna run. There are some really bad matchups for them if they get into a disadvantage slot in the playoffs, and I think they're gonna run into those, and it's gonna cost them.
Yep.
Which is why I don't really like them right now. I mean, they can fix the things easily, but they haven't shown a winning list to fix. It's. We should talk about the fact that you can fix it doesn't mean that you will. Because you don't want to. The other one, so the Lakers are the other interesting one at the bottom here.
Yeah.
Let's just say it, the Lakers aren't good. And the Lakers really are in a position where they should trade LeBron or Anthony Davis. This is not a team that is built to win. LeBron is starting to look mortal. Anthony Davis isn't who he was, and he's not going to be able to stay on the court. And Russ is actually being effective this year. Being used. I've been saying since he got there that he should play as little as possible with LeBron on that team to be effective.
Right.
And what I mean by that is you want to stagger him so that his minutes are coming when LeBron. So basically, you want Brody playing off LeBron. You want him playing off the bench. You want him playing off help. You want him being a physical beast against second units or being the centerpiece when he's on. And that is the most effective use of him. If you try to put him in LeBron, you're basically reducing both around, right? Yeah. So you want to stretch it out. And they are doing that. I do think that and I've said this, the Lakers, the scapegoat for last season was the coach, right? And, that was Frank Vogel did a good job with a bad roster. And Ham is being put in a very bad position because this team is not as good roster-wise. I mean, it's comparable, but LeBron is less than he was last year, and they still got the same piece. Now they added the piece on the side, but I don't think he doesn't have as good as a roster as Vogel did last season. And Vogel did a good job with bad pieces. So this roster isn't it. Now they keep talking about making some sort of trade, but the problem I think for them is that because of Victor Wembanyama, do you want to trade with the Lakers for these old broke-ass assets, or do you want to trade with somebody who has shiny picks? Right. So it is a situation where Victor being this good, the draft game means that people are less likely to want to trade with the Lakers because they want the shiny picks. The Lakers don't have any shiny.
Yeah. The Lakers are shooting 29% from three. And somehow inexplicably Rob Pelinka got extended, and I do not envy. I was just listening to the uh, potential for NBA expansion and what that means in terms of money coming into the league. And, I'm not suggesting that the Bus family sell the team, but man, you are just it seems like they're completely out of their element at this point.
Yeah, but
They're getting
but
lapped.
they're,
They're getting
they're
lapped.
but they're still getting national TV games. You're still the Lakers, and this is not the time to sell them. Like you sell it after you get the next TV deal, and then the Lakers are the Lakers are going to probably be, if not the most expensive franchise in the world, top three. Because they're in that conversation now, and this is before the new TV deal comes in. And when the new TV deal comes in at like twice the money, then fuck it. The Lakers are going to be like, God, what is the Lake? I can look at the but like the Lakers valuation is probably like $4 billion. It's got to be like $4 billion.
It's got to be
Got to be more than that. Lakers
Yeah.
valuation.
There's
we got to look this up.
there's chatter in the league of owners who are thinking about selling that for this next deal for that exact reason. And I just think from a competence standpoint, letting Vogel go, letting LeBron be GM.
So the team value, so the team value for the Lakers, as this is now before the new deal comes in, is $5.9 billion.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, you can just wait a couple of years and make an extra $5 to $6 billion because the team's gonna end up selling it. If you sell it in the next one, you're gonna sell it for like $12 billion. Could you imagine the bidding war for the Lakers, right? Like it'll be some Saudi Princeton or seriously, or like some oligarch, because it's gonna be like $12 billion.
Right.
I think that it's gonna. I think they're gonna be put. So yeah, they were their valuation for the Lakers as of the the Lakers were part of the Dodger sale in 2021. And so the valuation in 2021 as part, so there was a stake of 27% ownership in the team that was moved. The valuation was $5.5 billion. This is, again, before the new TV deal kicks in, right? So once the new TV deal kicks in, we're talking, as I said, I think they're going to be the most valuable. I think the Knicks are probably going to be the most valuable team in the world. Most valuable, valuable sports valuable funds, like me typing teams.
We're going to skip over the Rockets too, by the way, because they are what they are.
Yeah, there's no reason the Rockets
there.
are the Rockets. Yeah, so the most valuable sports team right now is the Cowboys. The Cowboys are listed 5.7 billion. The Yankees are listed 5.25. The Knicks at 5, and the Lakers were valued at 5.7. I would say that all the NBA teams are going to skip the MLB and the NFL teams because of the valuation, and that's effectively the NBA teams are going to be the most valuable real estate in the sports world, right? More valuable than Real. And again, because it's right now they're valuable before the TV contract is up by twice, so it'll end up being $8-9 billion where they sell. So there's no point in the Lakers selling. So yes, of course you extend Rob Pelinka. Rob Pelinka's a media. The reason they're extending it is not necessarily the building stuff; is his ties in the media industry. So effectively, can he make your team look more valuable? Yes, make him look more valuable. And if you were preparing to sell him, then you would definitely extend him out so that you can get it, so you can sell in the next contract. And that means Genie ran this team from a $1 billion valuation to a $10 billion valuation. Good for Genie, right?
And we will take that as a way.
We will take the $9 billion. We will take the $9 billion back. Yeah.
We will take that and put a bow on it by saying the next owner of your Los Angeles Lakers will be Elon Musk. Arturo, thank you for coming out.
Oh God. Hey, pick your final. Tell me what your finals is right now.
My finals picks from each side. I'm gonna go. He's in the spot here. I'm gonna go. I want to. It's tough, I like. The hardest part for me is probably it's going to be Bucks Celtics in the Eastern Conference Final.
Yes,
the Cavs are.
Well, I mean, it might be in the second round. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, that to me is going to be whoever. And so that one, if the Bucks stay healthy, I think they win it all. If they don't, I think the Celtics with a healthy Rob Will, that's up. In the West, I think it's very wide open. It could be the Suns. If they make a move, they still got Crowder sitting at home. It could be the Grizzlies. It could be the Clippers if they stay healthy. Those are probably my top three.
The Grizzlies lost in the second round, not the third round.
Yeah.
They lost to the Warriors semi, not the conference finals. I'm gonna go Celtics Clippers, I think. Because there's nobody out in the West. And again, if Kawhi's healthy, right?
Yep.
Then I do think this is Kawhi, this might be Kawhi's last big shot at it. And I think again, Lou and George, and this is a team that again, veteran and good coach, and I think that, and the West is open enough that I think them, if they're just healthy enough, they can get in there. They've been again. It's not like the Clippers haven't been there even when they haven't been healthy. People talk smack about them. Ilo's done some shit with that. Once you got off Doc, then yeah, that team's done some shit. And even with Verhan, so they've got full strength. And yes, and then I think it's going to be Celtics over Bucks because I trust the Celtics more over the course of a long season. Even though you just survived if it's Giannis again, it wouldn't surprise me. But the trick with him is that again that team is old.
Right.
And to me, what that means is when a team is that old, it is the oldest team in the league in terms of if you multiply the dates times the minutes played, and that means that they're very fragile to the stresses of a long season, right? So, where the Celtics are very young, the Bucks are very old. So the Bucks are playing well now and healthy, but they might degrade. They're probably going to degrade as the season goes on. The Celtics are playing well, but they're shorthanded, and they're going to get better as guys like Rob will come back. So I do think that kind of favors them. I think the Cavs are good, but they're not quite ready, right? I think this is a season where the Cavs are happy winning a playoff series and getting winning a close series or losing a close series in the second round against the Bucks or Celtics, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is a very successful season for the Cavs, and I'm probably looking at that. The Raptors are always going to give people problems, but I don't know that they have that top level talent, and I don't take the Hawks seriously as a contender to get to the finals. And at West, there's a bunch of teams, but the ones that I think have the top level talent are the Clippers, the Mavs, and Golden State. And honestly, the Clippers are the ones I trust the most in a series if they're healthy.
Right.
I think if the Warriors basically figure out the situation and clean out the Wiseman, they should try to see if they can move Wiseman. If they can move Wiseman for a couple of guys, they can basically to their depth somehow. Then that would be a win, and then definitely it's the Warriors. But I don't know. Again, the Warriors are very their Warriors are very irrational. It's sunk cost, what they call the sunk cost fallacy. Wiseman is their guy. Admitting that they were wrong on Wiseman would be against the perception of Joe Lacob, who's the owner of the Warriors, as that they're years ahead. The Warriors can't the front office can't screw up. So trading Wiseman would be admitting they screwed up. So I don't know they're gonna.
Right.
So yeah, Clippers Celtics. How
All right.
boring? Well, it's not boring. That'd be interesting.
Clippers Celtics for you. I still like the Grizzlies. I know it's early.
I mean, I think that's. I like the Grizzlies. Can I bet them to make? Can I bet on them to make the conference finals? I like them to make the conference finals, but they're the kind of team that they're gonna get into their own head so they don't start getting the calls in the conference finals. and I think it's they're still probably a year away, right? But it's a good problem to have. I think they could. I think look, if the Grizzlies got over the hump, I wouldn't be surprised. But historically, that they tend to kind of run into that kind of team tends to run into rough referee, kind of flame out a little bit in that conference finals. Just
all right.
It goes.
Well, we'll see how it goes. Well, thanks for coming back on again. It's great talking with you. And thank you everyone for listening. If you like this podcast, please make sure that you rate, and subscribe. If you're an Apple podcast, give us that 5-star rating. And the same goes for Spotify. Please leave us a review. Arturo, great talking with you again.
Yeah.